Leah Feagin is director of Mayfield Independent Schools in Kentucky. And in December, her town, Mayfield, was hit by a devastating tornado. So fortunately, her schools were not hit, but she was able to jump in action with her team. So we have lots of pictures, and she has stories and things to share with you today. So thank you for supporting her. Leah, thank you for being with us, and I'll let you take it from here.
Good morning. Thank you so much. Feel free to ask any questions. I don't necessarily have any kind of script. I had some pictures that I wanted to share and tell the story through the pictures. But any questions you might have, I'm happy to answer. There's a lot that I could go into, but with time constraints, I'm basically just going to kind of follow the story in the pictures. And then, I won't get into things like disaster feeding paperwork and all the ins and outs of all that kind of fun stuff. So
I will say, Leah, as you say that, if anybody here has questions about that, because they may not experience a tornado in their life, but all of us are probably going to go through some type of crisis. So if people do have questions, is it okay if they reach out to you with us?
Sure. I would help as best as I could. I'm by no means an expert. I kept saying my hopes are that I'm one and done on disaster feeding. So hopefully I never have to do that again. And never had before. So as many of you probably, we considered our COVID time of meal delivery and whatnot as somewhat of a disaster or emergency situation. But, we had pretty clear-cut guidelines. You had, once the guidance started coming in, you had follow a summer meal pattern or whatever that you might have been doing in your district. And so we just followed the guidelines and proceeded that way. The difference in this situation was there weren't really any guidelines. Everything was based on what you have available to you, which was basically nothing, initially. So we didn't have electricity, we didn't have water. So it was very much just, who has pallets of shelf-stable milk sitting around, like we didn't. But, you could only provide so much, because initially, like with any other power outage that we've had in the past, it would be like, okay, let's just use up our cooler items first, because they're going to go bad. The freezer can stay closed for a day or so and it should be okay. Well, they didn't have anywhere to store milk if we took them, 2 days worth of milk or whatever, because no one had electricity. So you had to keep in mind that you couldn't just load people up with items that needed to be kept cold or warmed up, because they didn't have that. So during COVID shutdown, when we were sending out meals, that was a whole different kind of ball game, because everyone had power and water. And so it was just very much kind of rolling with it and figuring out the best solution as we went along. So now having, done that and, like a lot of places, sure, there's a disaster preparedness manual and documentation out there. Well, I didn't have computer access for one thing. So if you have that saved electronically, that's not going to help you any. We didn't have ways to print off forms, and then our offices were without power, and it was pretty cold. So you couldn't go and sit and work in your office, even if you could get like a internet hotspot or whatever, because it was too cold. I mean, it just wasn't, you couldn't do that for very long. So fortunately, our high school got a generator pretty quick. So if you want to go ahead and start with the pictures, and we can kind of go from there. So the night of the tornado, our communication was very limited. That was a Friday night, and we, were kind of expecting things to be pretty severe. You can never prepare yourself for things like this, but
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Well, I was going to say that view right there is what I saw that Saturday morning when I received the message that the school. So initially I received a message that our schools had all been hit. So I was just expecting to not even have schools. And then I got the message that no, there was little to no damage to the schools. And then there was a generator, a backup generator for freezer cooler, which we had in place many years ago. I mean, that's anytime there's a power outage, I know my freezer and cooler, my walk-in freezer, walk-in cooler at middle school and high school are backed up. So I thought, you know what, I'm not going to take any chances. I'm just going to go see for myself. And typically, hundreds of times I've made the right turn onto this street and I'm headed straight down here to the middle school, which is through this debris on the right. And that's the first thing I see. So that was like one of the first realities of, okay, so this is not normal. Like this, nothing about this is going to be what I'm used to doing or what is normally accessible to me. So I had to, fortunately, you know, it's a small town and I'm very familiar with all the streets. So I just had to come up with other routes in and out of the schools. Sometime it might have meant like driving around debris in kind of up into yards and things like that. Fortunately, I don't know how, but I never had a tire punctured, which is unbelievable because you were driving over. That's the other thing too, that my husband said to me, because he works for our water department. And so I didn't really see him for weeks on end. But he said before he left, you know, you can drive over power lines because we have no power. You know, none of these lines are hot. And I thought to myself, this is a statement I never would have ever expected, us, like a conversation we would never have to have. And you know, the one thing you learn is never drive over power lines, never touch down power lines. And now here we are. And anytime someone would be riding with me, they'd be like, oh, and I'd be like, no, it's fine. It's not hot. It's fine. And we're just constantly driving over all these power lines, which was so surreal. It's hard to really like when you experience that, you feel like you're in some kind of third world country or like someplace where maybe explosives have gone off. Like it's unbelievable. So that's how I was feeling day in and day out. It just felt very surreal. So I'm headed to the school. I get there and that school, the middle school, and you can go on to the next picture. I think it just shows some of the things I was seeing along the way. Yeah, that was one of the just like, wow, like people can't go anywhere. People can't go get food because if they do still have a vehicle, it may be covered, you know, and that was one of the things we kept trying to explain to people wanting to help or, you know, well, have people come here to get food, have people go to the fairgrounds. Well, they don't have transportation. So there's no way they can do that. You have to take the food to them. And I think I was probably one of the few people that understood that. I think it's probably better understood now after having done that for weeks. But initially, I was the one assisting with summer meal programs and things like that. In addition to our transportation department, I'd say they had a firm grasp of that. And we all knew that so many of these families already didn't have vehicles. They walked to work, the kids walked to school, or they used like the public transportation. So you know, driving to a church for a hot meal or the fairgrounds and et cetera was not an option. So what happened initially was the ones who could get to our high school that night served as a shelter, and the ones who could get there, of course, there was no power, but so they had to quickly move them somewhere else. But initially, you know, it was just about getting people in a safe place. So once they got everyone that they felt needed help, they bused them to a church outside of the city that was in a small town that had power. So that served then as a shelter in the few weeks to come. So if you want to go on to the next picture, yeah, that's one of the houses near the middle school. You can go on to the next picture because that's like, you know, salvageable to some extent of some contents, but there were some houses that were just obliterated. There was nothing left. And then the next picture is the middle school. So I remember standing right there as I'm taking that picture, and I call our superintendent and I said, there's a little bit of damage at the middle school. And he's like, where? And of course, I'm back here because this is my entrance and exit to the middle school, the cafeteria, the loading dock back here. So somebody probably went to the front of the building. Everything looks fine. And they moved on to the next, you know, item on their list. And so this corner of the building is actually our extra storage for cafeteria, and we have a extra walk-in freezer in that corner. And so I was like, oh, I just hope, I'm walking in like, and compared to people who lost lives and lost homes, this is minor. But when it's your world and it's just like, okay, I'm walking in and I'm thinking, I hope that this is okay on the inside. It doesn't look so great on the outside. And, there was just a little small water leak coming in through the ceiling right as you're walking into the kitchen area. But everything else was fine. And I was like, okay, we can deal with that, moving on. So that's been fixed and everything's good to go there now. But one of the things I did once I kind of pulled things out of reach-in coolers and freezers and moved to the space that had the generator, moved on to the next thing. And so then that was, and I think probably if it's not the next picture, the option for that's just a very historic landmark there that I had taken a picture of. That's like actually on the way to my office from the middle school, and it had a lot of trees down, but the building was still intact. So the
did you want me to go to the next one?
Yeah, you can go on to the next one. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this
and I'm just keeping us. We got about 5 minutes. So I just want to make sure you were on.
Wow.
I know. There's so much to say. There's so much to say.
This shows you just the extent of like you had to get in a very narrow window going under this power line so that you didn't catch lines on your mirrors and things like that. So you can go into the next picture. And that was just all the time because that was a street where we were delivering meals. And so we set up a little bit of a central place at our court square. US Foods brought in a refrigerator freezer truck, and that was wonderful. One of the directors, the second one from the left there, Amber, she already had a separate business that had a mobile food truck that they used at offices and things of that nature. These are all directors here. Bailey is on the left, and Amber is Ballard County. She has the mobile feeding, and then Mackenzie is Marshall County. And so Mackenzie's county also was quite affected. They had, whereas ours went through the main part of town, Mackenzie had like a whole community subdivision area that was destroyed on Kentucky Lake. So you can go on to the next picture. That way we can show some of this other. Yeah, that's a church right there near the court square. And that was just a very symbolic picture. There's our courthouse. Yeah. And I mean, when you look at some of the across the street and some of the buildings that were just like demolished, you just wonder how even that much was left standing. And that will have to be, they won't be able to salvage that. That will have to be excavated. And you can go into the next one. I think there's our option for our elementary school, because it was the one that didn't have a generator backup. And I don't know how this happens. Sometimes things would just like be right in front of me and I wouldn't even know how it happened, but somehow somebody got my number to the guy that owns these, and he's out of Lexington, Kentucky. And he said, I'll have it there this evening. And this is all Saturday morning. I mean, we're not even 24 hours out yet. And so we were able to get the things out of that freezer and into this truck. The only problem with it, again, no electricity. So you're operating off of a generator, a gas powered generator. So 24/7, my husband and I were having to make sure that gas was in this truck. And so, like I said, he was working nonstop anyway. So if I was home at 10 o'clock and he was headed home at midnight, he would go by and put gas in it. And we just left a gas can sitting right by it. So it was very much a team effort. And then other people got wind of what we were doing. And so then I would get a call, hey, do you want me to go put gas in your generator? And from different people. And then a church started sending someone on ATVs with gas cans, and they would go around and just fill up generators wherever they might be in operation. So it just becomes like, there's no protocol for that. There's no plan in place for that. It's just everybody pitching in to do what needs to be done. So if you want to go on, and we can show a little bit of so we did mobile feeding, and then this was more of like our central location. So what I could do if I had apples and milks, like if you see to the right on that table, there's a milk cooler. I could take that up there, because that was one of those situations where We had people walking distance from, this is one of our summer meal sites, actually. In the summer, we set up at the Court Square, and we have a summer meal site there every summer. It's usually like on the back of our fire station. And we usually have like our volunteers at that side are usually the firemen and the city hall personnel and our police department. Well, all that was gone now. So I was like, well, I know this is someplace people can walk to that have a need. And we would have like that kid right there, his family and some other families would come every day. And we got to where we figured out, okay, they don't have a car. So we would have bags, and then we would load them up with stuff for the rest of the day, because that truck was only operating at breakfast and lunch. And so that was initially very, very helpful. And it was just one of those things that just kind of fell into place. And so then when I would be out delivering meals, if I would use up all that I had, I could go to this truck and I could say, okay, I need 10 more meals, and I would go back out. So I kind of used it as my center of operations also, in addition to our high school. We had tons of, go ahead.
Go ahead. I thought you were ready. I was just going to throw an idea out there. So
we had tons of food donated, and that's what I was going to say. We were utilizing a lot of donated food also.
I'm wondering about, because I have 1019 and I've always been very, respectful of people's time. How would you feel about a part 2?
Oh yeah, that's fine. That's perfectly fine.
Would y'all feel okay about that? Because we could tell everybody who needs to go, but then I would feel bad because then they wouldn't get to see it. So how can we do that?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay. So gosh, I feel, I don't ever want to cut you off, but I always want to be respectful. So if anyone is interested, whoops, every time I do it. If you are interested in anything that we have at Preferred, I tell you this every week, so feel free to take your phone and scan the barcode, and that will download our product guide. And if I go too fast as we're wrapping up, then just contact. We have sales at preppackage.com. We have a loaner program available for our HS48 machine, the one behind me. And I think that's all. I've got 1020. So I want to thank Leah so much for being with us today. And Leah, do you think this time next week will work?
Sure.
10 to 10:20 Central Time? Okay. And we'll get all the rest of her pictures in order, because I know that it's so much and I want you all to hear it. So thank you so much for joining us. Tammy. Well, actually, I didn't even think of it, but I was like, I can't cut Leah off. I can't.
Now you'll get all of us back, because we all want to finish here. So that was good marketing. That was good trick.
I know.
I just want to say to Leah, you're an inspiration, all of your staff. I wanted to cry when I saw that picture. So it's amazing.
Yeah.
Brings it home.
Thank you. And and I have a lot more to say about all the people. Like there's a lot of people I want to give some kudos to, because it definitely took a village.
Leah, you're awesome. You're the best. I'm so glad that you agreed to join us and to come back. I wondered if 20 minutes would be enough time. So I'll put all, the initial YouTube link, all the things that we always do every week. And then we will see you all next week at 10 o'clock Central. Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.